Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and just pull up audio here. We're waiting on Greg. He's the one who I am doing the Goritsi for here, House Goritsi. So for Wrath of Kings, and we're just waiting on him. As soon as I hear from him what's going on, we'll be able to get going with painting on this stuff. So apologize that we're having a little bit of delay in the feed here. So anyway, with that being said, though, I guess I'll talk a little bit about announcements that are coming up and things that are going to be happening while we're waiting for Greg to hop on. First thing is that in
Hello.
Greg, you're there.
Hi.
Awesome. Cool. I was just getting ready to get into some announcements, so well, I was buying some time waiting for you to hop on. So do me a favor, and I can see your video there in the corner. If you can turn off your camera but leave your audio on, that'll help delay lag. There you go. Awesome. Thanks. So, yep, you're coming through just fine. So, I was just doing a little bit of announcements before I get started on your model here. Basically, it was right in the middle of talking about Lock and Load. I'm going to be at Lock and Load on the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. And anyone who wants to get together in the hobby room and hang out for a bit, I will be there painting stuff and working on stuff most of the time. Also hoping to get some games in as well, so make sure and stop by and say hi. For those of you that missed the announcement I made on Painting with John a while back, it was on Sunday actually. It was in regards to Lock and Load and the fact that I've been documenting my time doing video journal entries on my entry for Lock and Load. And when Lock and Load is all over, I'm going to be posting up a video that is going to be highlighting that process I went through to create that entry and kind of my thoughts on it and how the whole thing went. So that should be some pretty good times. I'm looking forward to it. But that's not what we're here for. We're here for Greg right now, and we are here for painting his Wrath of King miniatures. How does that picture look on your screen there, Greg?
Perfect.
Good. Well, this is the one I'm going to start with tonight. This is, I believe it's a Sword Dancer, correct?
Yes, that sounds right.
Okay. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're hoping to get out of these tutorial videos tonight?
Just learning some basics again and figuring out how to do a theme coherently all together, because all my other armies are pretty piecemeal here and there, so it'd be nice to get them all done the same for once.
Get them all done at the same time. Cool. All right. Well, you wanted to, as we went back and forth, talking about developing this paint scheme and stuff, you were kind of sitting on the fence about staying with the studio scheme, which has the vampires in a purple and white scheme and the werewolves that are in the box set in a blue and white scheme, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And as we were talking, I was kind of suggesting to keep the theme cohesive through the entire army and just stick with blue and white on all of them. So is that still the plan?
Yeah, going blue and white on all seems good.
Okay. And then there was one other thing too that you were wanting to do, which I think is kind of interesting with this PaintCast, and it's going to be a couple extra videos that we'll be doing, but we're going to be talking about basing and doing some a very specific type of basing. You wanted these guys to have a kind of a forest, riverside kind of theme, right?
Yeah, I'm tired of just the plain flop, like throw some sand on there or whatever.
Right.
Nice to have some color.
Yeah, and so what you did is you got some of the secret weapon miniature lava bases, which they're on the other side of the room right now, so I'll have to grab those later. And we're going to be painting those up to make them look like a riverbank, complete with foliage and grasses and water effects and all that stuff, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. So we'll be getting to that in a few videos, but for now, we want to get started on her here. And just to give you an idea of where I'm at, I started with priming this model yesterday. And I went with a white primer, and I didn't apply it very thick. That was kind of the first thing I noticed about the Wrath of King miniatures is, while they look very cool and they're very dynamic, the detail on them is it's not that it's soft and lacking detail, it's just it's very finely detailed, and so I don't want to cover that up. So I was really sparing with the primer because I wanted to make sure everything stays visible. And for those of you interested in scale, here is a drudge, a privateer press drudge, in comparison. So they're about a 30 millimeter heroic scale miniature. So just give you guys an idea of where it's at. And I just want to tone something down here just a little bit on the camera and make the color just look a little more accurate. And Greg, I'm here for you right now. So as we're going through this, if you have any questions about what I'm doing or how I'm applying paints or colors or anything like that, make sure and holler so we don't lose you. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
What primer did you go with?
I actually, on this one, I just use regular P3 primer. Normally I will spray my Vallejo polyurethane primer through my airbrush, but I was outside yesterday. It was a nice day. The sun was out. I just decided to use the P3 primer. So, but you can use either or. You'll be fine with that. Now, as far as the basic colors that I'm thinking, this is kind of where I'm leaning right now. Are working in these three colors right here. Signar blue highlight for your blues. These are going to be the base colors. Menoth white base for the white, and then Bootstrap leather for leather colors. I think this will add a nice contrast to the blue and white, break it up just a little bit, and give just a little bit of warmth to it. So as far as color placement, what I'm thinking on her, looking at the images that are online, as far as what colors are where. It looks like they do like the corset and the pants and the gloves in all of the leather colors. So that's kind of what I'm going to be going with. And then the cloths we're going to do largely in blue, and then also trim some of them out in white as well. So how does that, what do you think of that? How would that look?
That sounds good.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started with applying the blue first. On the werewolf that I'm going to be doing for you, I'll be doing the airbrushing, but with this model being as small as it is, I think we can get away with base coating everything by hand, and it'll be just fine. They are a plastic model. Someone in chat was asking if they're a resin or plastic model or metal. They are a plastic, very similar to the P3 or the Privateer Press plastic that the troops are made out of. This model needed very little cleanup, though. It was very clean right out of the bag, so it really didn't need much at all. Okay, so we're gonna do this main coat that she's in right now. We're gonna do that in the blue, and so I've thinned. I've got this Signar blue highlight on my wet palette, and we're just gonna start adding this in with your brush. I guess I could have at least got this base coat out of the way so we weren't on air with you just watching me base coat minis.
No, that's good. Pretty new to base coating. I can get it in there, but it's definitely not as smooth. So.
Well, and I think that's where the primer is going to help you. One advantage that I find, Greg, to using a very thin layer of primer is it gives the surface just a little bit of texture. Sometimes you'll hear that referred to as tooth. It gives the paint some tooth, and that slight bit of texture really helps the paint adhere to it a lot better. The other thing too is you want to watch the amount of paint that's actually on your brush when you're doing this. If there's too much paint on your brush, you're going to end up with a lot of puddling of the paint, and that's what's going to give you the brush strokes, and that's what's going to give you the uneven looking appearance.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then with the wet palette really helps too. It thins the paint out just enough so that applying the paint is just a little more smooth, and it spreads just a little more evenly. All right. Now this inside cloak here, we're going to do that in the Menoth white base. That'll, I think, produce a little more contrast, and it'll look good. The sash here in the middle, that'll be white, and then this corset, that'll be brown. The plumage on her shoulders there, plumage, I don't know if that's the right word, but the ruffled shoulders, I think we'll do those white as well as the collar too. So, and then the gloves here, we'll hold off on those for now. Those could potentially either be blue or brown, depending on which way, what color we have to use to balance the scheme out.
Gotcha.
Right. My kids are watching a movie in the background. Is that sound carrying over, Greg?
Very minuscule. You can kind of hear a little bit, but it's not in any way.
Okay. Okay. I'm mixing up the Menoth white base right now, and we're going to apply a layer of that now. I haven't decided yet on the skin tones what we're going to do. I don't want to do like a traditional skin tone, light colored skin, female skin, because these are supposed to be vampires, right?
Right.
So I've been playing around with different colors that I'll use for the to kind of give it a more pale vampiric type look. So, but I don't think we'll get to the skin tonight, so that's not a huge rush right now anyway. Right now, just trying to get some of these colors blocked in, and get onto some of the shading and the highlighting. Okay. So you mentioned earlier that you were in class. Are you still in school?
I'm down here for military training in just a 3-month class.
Oh, cool. What branch are you in?
Air Force. I'm in the Guard at the moment.
Oh, very cool, man. Very cool. So did you have a decent Memorial Day?
Yeah, it was pretty good actually.
Yeah?
It was a great 4-day weekend.
Awesome. Awesome.
You excited for the new releases of Lock and Load coming out?
Oh, man. Yeah.
What already do you play?
Okay, so I'm gonna digress for a minute. My ultimate goal is to have a painted army for each faction.
Oh, man.
Is that ever going to happen? Probably not. I don't have the time for that, and I don't know if I have the energy for that either. But that would be, the ultimate goal. But right now, what I currently have is I have a Menoth army that I'm painting. That is quite far along, and then I also have a um, gosh, what's it called? I just went blank. Circle Orboros is the Horde's army that I'm currently working on and painting. And so,
stones or living with them?
well, mostly what I've painted right now is the living models. I've got a cool Getter-X conversion that Eric over at Goldrake Studios did for me, and I've got a couple of stalkers painted up. Chromac is painted up. I've got a couple sets of shifting stones painted up, but I'm going more living with them right now. Eventually I'll get Bradigus and try that whole thing and see what the fuss is about that. But really I've kind of given up on any kind of competitive play. I just don't have the time to put into it to be any good at actually competing at tournaments. I'll go to them to support the local community and play and have a good time, hang out with friends, but I don't have any illusions anymore of being a decent player in that respect. So
as long as you're having fun.
Oh yeah, and this right here, the painting, that's what I really enjoy, and that's what I really have a good time doing, and that's what matters to me right now. Okay. So where are you currently stationed at?
I'm in Boise at the Guard unit there. I'm just down in California for training, so it's good times.
Oh man, so I need to come over there to one of the Boise tournaments sometime then. Say hi.
Yeah, I'm going to try and get up to the Idaho Falls.
Uh-huh.
You're in Twin Falls, right?
Yeah, well, no, I'm in Idaho Falls.
Oh, Twin Falls is either. I'm trying to get to Twin Falls on the 27th of June, I think. And then, yeah, anytime you guys have another tournament in Idaho Falls, I'll probably come up for that.
Oh, sweet. I know there's one this weekend. I was going to go to it, but I'll probably be stepping out because I want to finish my painting entry for Lock and Load.
Oh, what are you submitting there?
I don't want to say quite yet.
Okay, my bad.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm telling everyone that. So it's one thing I've been doing is I've got a couple of friends that have been giving me some objective feedback on the mini as I've been working on it, and one of them has had quite a bit of experience submitting stuff to painting competitions, and he just suggested that I not say anything, and it's not really the reason why he recommends it is so that the judges who are looking at the miniature are seeing it for the first time when they see your submission. So it's not there's no preconceived opinions already,
Yeah, that's right.
So, but when Lock and Load is over, I will be posting up some videos of my process and painting it and stuff. So.
Oh, cool. So you did some recordings on that?
I did. I've got about 40, almost 50 hours worth of recordings right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I don't know what format I'm going to use to present them. I don't know if I'm going to edit them all down or just put them up an hour at a time or what. But we'll see what happens. So. Yeah.
Quick question: what brush are you using for this?
Yeah, this is a. Give me 1 second here. I just need to pop that window. This is a Scharf Kolinsky 3000, size number 1. And I really prefer these particular brushes over the Winsor & Newton. Let me show you a Winsor & Newton here. So this is a Series 7. Also a size 1. And you can see the difference in the length of the bristles.
Yeah.
These longer brushes actually, I think, keep the brush or keep the paint more moist for longer periods of time. So you get a smoother base coats and whatnot. And I'm looking at this Bootstrap Leather, and I'm thinking it might be a little light. What are your thoughts on it?
From the video, it doesn't look bad.
Okay.
But I mean, you're in person, so you can definitely give a better eye for this.
Well, I think we might just shade it down with some darker brown.
Okay.
And that'll help. And it's also still a fairly thin coat, so.
So I recently was talking to someone here locally who said they just do their base coats and they shade everything in black. Is that not a normal thing, or is that just like a quick standard? Like, just gets in all the recesses, you're good to go, gaming table wise?
Oh, like he does it all with a wash?
Yep. Yeah. Is it Null Oil, the Games Workshop one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm actually going to do something kind of similar to that with you tonight on her here. But we're not going to drench the whole model in the base coat. We're going to kind of work our way around and blend the washes a little bit. So, but I'll show you that here in just a minute. Okay, so I think we've got a solid blue here, a good solid blue. So what I want to do is start working on shading this now, and we're gonna warm this up just a little bit. And to do that, we're going to use Exile Blue and Sanguine Base. And I want to do about a 2-to-1 mixture, so about 2 parts Exile Blue to 1 part Sanguine Base. That's going to give us a nice rosy blue, almost purplish color, and it'll help keep the shade fairly warm, so it's not quite so cool. Give some nice contrast to the blue.
And so you're just mixing those two together with like a water, or do you like the mixing media from Private Press, or how do you do that?
Just putting it right here on my wet palette. Let me bring it over here. These are the two. This is the mix of the two colors. Okay. And then we're going to just blend it in to the area where the shadows are.
Sweet.
So. And this will do a little bit of two-brush blending with. You said you wanted to talk a little bit about that, so that's how we'll do this part. And when you're two-brush blending, you've got two brushes here. One's your application brush, one is your blending brush. And essentially what you're going to do is with your application brush, you'll put the color where you want it, and then with your blending brush, you'll come in and moving in a swishing motion, you'll push into the paint and then pull back out. Okay?
Okay.
So got the blue on there. We're going to start right here in this little corner and slowly start pushing into that and then pulling it out. And this her cloak has some texture from folds and some other detail that's on there, so it's actually blending out pretty nice. And when you're two-brush blending, you want to keep that blending brush pretty clean. So have a cup of clean water nearby that you can mix that brush in or rinse that brush out in from time to time. And also what's going to help give some volume to the cloak here particularly because she's got all these, I don't know what they are, but the unpainted area on her cloak, these white and vertical and horizontal stripes there, because she's got those there so clearly defining these different areas, I'm kind of concentrating all the shadow in one corner in each one. And that's going to help add to the appearance of volume and three dimension on the surface. So try not to put shadows next to shadows or highlights next to highlights. And you can see how that creates a nice shading effect there.
Yeah. And so for your wet blending brush, are you using, like, I know some people use spit, some people use water, like, what are you using to keep it moist?
I drag the brush across my tongue.
Okay.
Yeah. So, hope that doesn't gross you out too much.
No, not at all. Just curious what method you guys use.
Yeah. I keep my wet blending brush fairly dry. You don't want to load it up too much with moisture. Okay, and then on the back of her cloak here, or back of her jacket here, I'm going to add a little bit of shadow back in here. And just as you're blending this, really push the paint into the folds of the jacket there, so that they sink into the shadow. Same thing on this side here. And this is a nice thing about wet blending, is if you have too much paint there, you can always take it off with the brush. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And in what, 10 minutes there, we did the shading on that blue.
Yeah.
So
Isn't that nice?
yeah, so two brush blending really gives you some quick results.
So how did you pick the colors? Like, is that just from experience, or do you have like a wheel you go to?
Yeah, well, you can use a little bit of both. I've got a color wheel here. Set that off to the side for a second, and let me change the zoom here, the focus a little bit. So there we go. So essentially, when you're working with a color wheel, you've got these two triangles here. You've got a triad, and then you've got a split complementary, and then the straight line is complementary. Okay, so when you're using a color wheel to try and figure out a color scheme, these outside edges, of course, are where the colors are, but what these arrows are pointing to tells you whether or not you're dealing with a complementary color scheme, or a triad, or a split complementary, or what have you. So when I put the complementary arrow on the blue, it tells me that the complementary color to that is orange. Okay, if I put it on like a blue violet, which would be like a mid-tone, I'm moving more towards the yellow orange. Okay, so that kind of tells me that in order to set or paint a blue scheme, I want to make sure I'm using complementary colors that are going to be in the orange family. Okay, so I want to stick with the blues, and I want to stick with the oranges. So why then am I using a off-white as my complementary color, and why don't I want to go to something like, you know, Cador red highlight to complement the blue, you know? Well, first off, because that is really strong and that is really bold, and I would do that on like Retribution or maybe Crix or something like that, but I don't think it works with the Wrath of Kings. So then the next question you got to ask yourself is then, so if I'm not going to use orange, what do I need to use that will complement the blue well? And that's where something like Menoth white base comes in. Because when you compare Menoth white base to a pure white, let me ask you this question here. If this is pure white, we'll just do a little experiment. Is a Menoth white base moving more towards an orange color, or is it moving more towards a blue color?
That's hard. Like, I guess more orange, probably.
Yeah. So in other words, this white is moving more towards a warmer color than it is moving towards a cool color. If you compare that to Frostbite, which
I see that.
you see what I'm saying? So essentially, Frostbite and Menoth white base, they're both a white color, but Menoth white base is a warm white. Frostbite is a cool white. Same thing with like Vallejo, the Vallejo model colors. Let me grab a couple here real quick. Oh, I don't have a pure white, so we'll compare it to the P3. So you've got a P3 pure white here, okay? Then you've got Vallejo Game Color Dark Sand, which is a warm white, and then you've got Vallejo Game Color or Model Color Sky Gray, which is a cool white. So when you're talking about whites, you're talking about that scale of warm and cool, dark and light. And so the way that I ultimately settled on, you know, the idea of using the Menoth white base to go with the blue is, first off, the blue is dark, so I want to use a complementary color that's light. So that means I want to steer away from something that's too dark as the overall complementary color. And I want to move my white more towards a warm orange than towards a cool blue. And so that's kind of how I settled on the Menoth white base. Now, the Bootstrap Leather comes in because we're going to use sparingly. I mean, she's only got, you know, just a couple parts on her that are done in the bootstrap. So we're going to use this fairly sparingly, but we're going to push this into the orange just a little bit so that we recapture some of that actual complementary color. And we'll just push it this far just a little bit in the area of the highlights. Okay? Does that help?
Yeah, that's actually very helpful.
Okay, cool. Okay, so where were we? We were painting here. So let me get another coat here on the of the bootstrap. And then I think we'll be ready to move on with that and making some stuff happen there. The one thing about Bootstrap Leather that I don't like is it is a fairly thin color, and it does take a few coats to get it to apply a completely opaque layer. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now, while we're waiting for that bootstrap to dry up, let's work a little bit on the highlighting here on her dress. What I want to do is we're not going to highlight in the traditional family, in the traditional manner of wet blending like I was with, what I did with the shadow. What I want to do is take advantage of the texture that's in the dress and highlight just those raised textured portions. Okay, so get get it focused back into focus there. There we go. So to do that, we're going to use the Frostbite blue, and you're going to add this to the base color of the Signar Blue highlight. And you'll start with about 2 parts Signar Blue highlight to 1 part Frostbite. And you'll add a drop of water to that too. So a brushful of the Signar Blue base, 2 brushfuls of the Signar Blue base, and about 1 brushful of the Frostbite, and then about a brushful of water, and that should give you a nice thinned out blue highlight. And then what you'll do, Greg, is you're just going to pull this highlight color across her dress, picking up just the highlight, the raised details, and kind of accentuating those things opposite of the shadow.
Okay.
And this is something, when you get to painting these guys on your own, that you should be able to go through pretty quick through the model, quickly through the models doing this. And try not to let the paint pool up as you're doing that. Just let it drag across and leave it as it is. And then for the final highlight, take the last highlight color you just mixed and add another drop of Frostbite to it without adding any more water, or maybe just a touch more water. And this one is going to be very strong, this highlight, so you want to be very sparing with this one and just really catch only the raised parts with it. And there you go. That's probably about as far as you want to highlight and shade that blue.
Sweet. Looks good.
Yeah, it does look pretty good, doesn't it? And then we need to do some highlighting and shading up here. So going back to the first highlight color, just going to add one right there, add one on the tops of the folds, and then add a little bit more of the second highlight color in now. Alright, there we go. Blue is done. At least that blue is. I'm thinking, as we're doing this, that I might actually paint these dividers on her dress there silver to match the plates, the silver armor plates that we're going to do. That might work. And I think there needs to be more blue on the front. So the legging here, I'm going to do that in blue.
Sounds good.
And that'll break up this white just a little bit more. And then the boots, I think we're going to do the boots in a black. And I think we'll do the gloves in black now that I'm thinking about it, starting to look at it. It's funny how that works with painting. This happens to me a lot when I'm painting miniatures. I'll have an idea of where colors are going to go, but it's not until I actually start seeing the colors on the palette, on the mini, and doing their thing, that I'm like, no, we need to do this here, I need to do that there. It almost becomes a little more fluid at that point. And speaking of the silver, I do want to go ahead and add in the paint the silver plates right now, so that I can see how that's starting to look. I'm thinking P3 Cold Still for that. It's a nice, clean, bright metallic color. So, do you play War Machine, Greg?
I do.
Yeah, what faction do you play?
Right now it's Legion, but I have Kriegs and Signar as my other armies.
Sweet. I wouldn't mind picking up a box set. I mentioned earlier I want a painted army for each faction. I think a place to start with that would be like the box set for each faction, or the alternate box set for each faction.
Yeah, those all-in-one boxes are pretty amazing deals too.
Yeah,
How big an army you wanted.
Yeah, and I got the Cador one, and now I'm kind of regretting it a little bit. I don't know. Because I don't know if I'll honestly ever get to it. It's kind of a nice dream to think about. When I'm at work and I don't have anything better to do and I can daydream, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know what I'm gonna do. I think I bit off too much though, and I think I need to think more about like maybe just a box set at this point.
That's fair. I know the press gangers have to have like one of each, or like two different box sets painted up. So.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's box sets or armies. I can't remember.
When I did it, it was just the box set. So I had the Signar battle box, and then the who did I do for the other one? Was it Menoth or no? I think it was Kriegs. Kriegs was my other battle box I did.
So you're a press ganger?
I was in New Mexico when I was stationed there for 3 years, but not anymore. They got two great press gangers at in Boise, so.
Awesome. Yeah, Boise's a good town. I've only been over there a couple times, but I like it. Even being there just for work, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, you didn't mind the traffic at all?
Nah, granted, I was only going between the hotel and where I was doing some training at, but I lived in California for 12 years and grew up in Arizona, so a little bit of traffic doesn't bother me.
Yeah. Where at in California?
Valencia is where I was going to high school at the time. It's down south near Ventura, inland from Ventura a little bit. And then lived in Sacramento for the first few years that my wife and I were married.
Yeah, I'm actually in Ventura. I guess Oxnard is technically the place. But
Yeah, I know Oxford.
that's funny.
Yeah.
They have a game store in Pasadena that plays on Thursdays, but trying to get over there, it's like 50 miles away, 60 maybe tops, and it's like, oh, it might take an hour. No, it takes over 2 hours with traffic.
Oh yeah. Everything in the valley is like an hour, 2 hours. It's crazy. I worked in San Fernando, which was only 30 miles away, and yeah, it took an hour and a half to get to work each day.
Dang.
Oh, it's crazy, man. I'm so glad to be out of California.
Yeah, besides the weather here, I won't really miss it, to be honest. But.
Yeah. So a couple spots where the silver got a little crazy on me that I'll have to clean up, but not worried about that. That silver looks nice, though, with the blue.
Yeah, really ties it in.
Yeah. And let me just clean that up real quick while I'm working on it. Okay. All right. So for the leather corset here, the first thing we want to do is mix up or take Army Painter Strong Tone ink, and we're going to wash the whole corset with that. Okay. And the only purpose that this is going to serve is to darken the brown down just a little bit, and also to bring some of the details out a little bit so that highlighting and shading will just be a little easier. And then this will dry pretty quick, and when it does, we'll put another wash on that's going to be a little bit more of an orange ink, and that's one of the things that's going to tie the warmth of this brown into the complementary scheme, and warm things up just a little bit on the brown. You can see how it makes the detail pop out a little bit at this point.
Yeah, definitely hits those lowered areas and makes it.
Yep. And so we'll let that dry for a minute, and we'll work a little bit on the whites now. Okay. And this is also another place where we're going to talk about using a wash more in more of a blending fashion, not just covering an entire area. And for this, I'm going to recommend the Secret Weapon Miniatures Dark Sepia Wash. And you're going to use 2 brushes with this. You'll use a blending brush, and you'll use an application brush. This is going to be my application brush, and then my Sharf is going to be my blending brush. And what you're going to do, just like the 2-brush blending thing almost, you'll put a dot of the wash where you want it, and then you're going to use the blending brush to kind of soften the edge of where the wash was, so that it doesn't leave a hard ring. You don't want it to puddle. You just want it to slightly darken that area. I don't know how well it's showing up for you on the camera. Whites tend not to show up too well.
I mean, you can see the shade you're putting in. So.
Okay, good. So try to avoid excess of puddling and try to avoid air bubbles. Those are the 2 things that'll make the wash look a little rough.
Okay.
Now up here, I just put a drop of it right at the top of the cloak, and I'm going to use my blending brush now to pull the wash down into the creases that I want it to go into. Yeah. And so that way, I'm not flooding the whole area. I'm just kind of putting it somewhere that I want it, and then using my other brush to kind of blend it and move it and push it around. So I'm going to add just a little bit more just to darken that up. And pull some of that excess off because I don't want it to pull quite that much. Okay. And the wash that we put on the bootstrap is almost dry, so we'll let that sit for a little bit. Let's go ahead and I'm going to do these shoulders here. We'll do those in the blue. I know we said white originally, but I think we need more blue on the front of the model. Let's see, what time are we at here? So we're getting on close to an hour now. So just a few more minutes and we'll probably wrap it up for tonight, Greg. And I'll move on to the next piece that I'll be working on. And I'm actually going to probably stop broadcasting after working a little bit on Assyria because I want to get to work on my lock and load entry, to be honest. So I've got a ton of work still that I have to finish on it. I have stripped and restarted the model that I'm working on about 4 times.
What?
And redone the base about 3 times. So I need to finish it if I'm gonna be done in time. So, which reminds me, for those of you who are watching live, there will be no PaintCast next week because I will be gone at lock and load most of the week. So, okay, so let's go back to this brown leather and we'll finish up there. So we did it. We based it in Bootstrap. We washed it in the dark tone or strong tone. Now I want to wash it in a little bit of an orange tone, just to warm it up, make it just be a little more orange. And so for that we're going to use some ink. And what I recommend is the P3 red and yellow ink. And let me show you how I mix the orange, because it can be a little tricky. So I got my wet palette here. And the mix right there. What you want to do literally is just add a drop of the yellow, add a drop of the red, okay, and then just take your tip of the brush and just dip it into the yellow, and then dip the tip into the red, and just kind of off to the side you want to start adding just a little bit at a time until you get a nice bright orange color, okay? But you don't want to use this concentrated because it'll affect the color way too much. So get yourself a little bit of water off of your wet palette and just mix this with a little bit of water and thin that out a little bit. And then that's a little less concentrated. That's a little better. Okay, And what we're going to do, and you don't want this ink to pool anywhere. You're just painting the brown with this orange, but not letting it actually pool up anywhere. And you see how that yellows that out just a little bit?
Yeah.
It's just changing it ever so slightly. And it's going a little too far yellow, not quite enough orange. So I'm going to just add a little more red into the ink that I just mixed, into that orange ink that I just mixed. And make an orange that just pushes a little more towards the red. See how that compares?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, it's a little more reddish now. There we go. That's looking a little better. Okay. So that gives us gives that brown a nice little orange hue to it, and we'll use that when we come back to this on our next paint cast. What we'll work on there is shading this brown and finishing shading and highlighting these whites and the skin tone, and then she'll be done.
Sweet.
But we'll probably go with like an umber, I'm thinking, on the shade with this, and it should look pretty good. And then we'll also get this sash here around her waist painted another color. So in the meantime, though, Greg, if you have any questions, anything that pops up, question-wise, feel free to email me, and we'll talk about whether or not you feel like you want to be on for the next broadcast or not, or if I should just keep moving forward. We can talk about that off air. But feel free to ask me anytime, any questions. We can talk that way. For the rest of you guys, if you do have any questions, you can contact me at redmodeling@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/redmodelingpaint. I do want to take a second real quick before I do the switch over to the next mini and answer a few questions that I received this week via email. The first question that I got, let me just go back to my emails, give me 1 second here. While I'm looking these up, did you have any questions, Greg?
No, you explained everything I had questions
Okay.
on, so that was good.
Okay.
Thank you.
No worries. Let me see here. I should have wrote these questions down. I gotta dig through a couple emails here. Let me go back to this one. Okay, here we go. Found them. All right. So the paint cards that I've been using. Here's an example of one of them, and I didn't do these with at the start with yours, Greg, but they will be included when I send the mini back. But the question is, what am I using for these paint cards? This is watercolor paper that you pick up at Michael's, like 20-pound paper. It's pretty stout stuff. And then I just cut it into these pieces that are 3 inches by 2 inches, and I've got a paper cutter that I do that on, and a pack of 20 of the sheets produces hundreds of these, I think, quite a few, enough that I don't need to worry about it for a while when I do it. So yeah, that's what I've been using for the paint cards. So hope that answers that question. Another question I got was, what paper do you use in your wet palette? He talks about how he's used wax paper, butcher paper, and none of them seem to work the way he wants. So he wants to know what paper I'm using. This is what I'm using. Let me show you here on the screen. Reynolds Cookie Baking Sheets, parchment paper, baker's parchment paper. I'll pull that out, put it on my wet palette, and it does a great job of letting the moisture through, but not thinning the paints out so much. Got another question here about oil paints. What's the oil paint? What would you recommend as an oil paint starter kit? Ooh, that's a little bit more of a loaded question, and I think I'm going to have to do like a dedicated broadcast on that, because there's a lot of information to process with oils. Obviously, you're going to need the oil paint, you're going to need the brushes, you're going to need odorless mineral spirits to clean up the paint, a palette to put the paints on. It's not all that different from acrylic paint as far as what you need with acrylic paints. It's just the cleanup is a little bit more particular on oil paints. But I think I'll do a dedicated broadcast on that one, maybe after Lock and Load. And one other question is regarding paint palettes. Do I just trash them once they get dirty enough, or do I clean them off? The acrylic paint pops off pretty good, especially if you run it through the dishwasher. But I mean, a 10-pack of them is usually just a couple bucks at Michael's, so you can just go through them that way too. But mostly I do most of my painting on my wet palette, so I really don't go through a lot of dry palettes. And it looks like the last question I've got here is related to my thumb. They want to know why I use my thumb as a palette. So let me explain. So let me put a paper towel right here so you guys can see. Okay. You take your paint off your palette, you go to paint your mini, you've got your brush loaded, so you drag it across your towel and you start applying the actual paint. Nothing wrong with that, except that I feel personally that when you go to drag your brush across the towel is absorbing the moisture from your brush, not necessarily the pigment of the brush. And so you end up losing more control of the paint by putting it on the towel. The paper towel is more absorbent, and you're not going to get as much control. However, if I take the same paint, load up my brush, and then test it on my thumb, I can see how the paint is going to interact with a non-absorbent surface. I can feel how moist the paint is. As I look and pull the paint across the wrinkles of my skin, I can see how easily it flows into those places, and determine if my paint needs to be thinner or if my paint needs to be thicker, or what's going on there. So that's the reason why I use my thumb as a wet palette of sorts, or a dry palette of sorts, is to make sure the paint is of the consistency and thinness that I'm looking for. So that's it in a nutshell of why I do that. So hope that answers your question for the guy that asked that. So in the meantime, guys, give me about 5 minutes. I'm going to take a quick break and reset and get going on Assyria, and then I will be back and we'll finish that up for the night. So Greg, thanks for being on, and yeah, and if you have any questions, man, give me a call.
All right. Thanks.
All right, we'll talk to you later, and guys, I'll be back in about 5 minutes. Thanks a lot. See ya.